something that it was really important to me, to be independent, to be self-sufficient, to be successful, to be financially independent. These were all goals of mine and values that I had, and so I was really pursuing them really strongly. But I also had values of, being a good mother and being responsible to my family and loving my husband and being involved in church. So I really had this, perfectionist attitude and drive, which is extremely unrealistic, and I didn't think it was at the time. I just thought that I was failing and unhappy, but it took me completely just dropping it all and saying, you know what, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know it's going to be okay, and I know it can't continue in the way that I am. Couldn't continue a day longer. I got my career going. I was married. I started having kids, and the work I was doing was in landscape architecture was really intense and very busy. My work that I said I was doing for myself to have my own identity and to keep me as a part of the world, not isolated in my home, kind of thing. It was draining me. It wasn't filling me. And I was extremely frustrated and felt like I was putting in a lot of face time that I had to be during office hours, and it just wasn't convenient for my family anymore and for myself. And when I had Claire, it just became exponentially more difficult. Things built up to this point. When I finally put in my resignation and I gave him a 2-month notice, I felt this immediate sense of relief. In that moment, when I stepped out in faith, it was a release when I finally did it. I wasn't planning on stepping out of faith. That was not part of my plan. I was there, and I couldn't take another moment in the way that I was living my life, spreading myself so thin, and so it became like my only choice. I just had to release something, and I released what was the hardest and really what became the least important to me, which was my job. So then all of a sudden this identity that I had striven for so long wasn't the one I wanted to claim, and so then I didn't know what to think of myself. In the meantime, then I had a client who was interested in working with me, so he said he'd hire me outside of the office to do the same work I was doing inside, so I could make some money that way. My schedule opened up so that I could volunteer at the homeless shelter, Hesed House in Aurora. I did that 1 day a week. It was a wonderful time in my life. I had time with my kids, and I brought my kids to church when I had Bible study, and I got to know their parents at school and at church, and built relationships in other places. I really built a lot more relationships, and I was able to serve and give and have meaning in my life. But all of a sudden it was a different meaning than I was looking for before. And I didn't really know I was looking for it, but it just happened. I was like, oh, now I can do this, now I can do that. I don't have to be stuck with the way other people are telling me I need to live my life, or the way I felt like I had to live my life, having it all in a different way. And I realized I had it all in a new way, a so much better way. I went to Bible study at church. I was really mentored and fed by my pastor, a female pastor. There was a woman there who was working on her master's at seminary at Lutheran School of Theology in Chicago, and she was working full time outside of it. So she was just taking one class on a Tuesday night in Chicago. My pastor said, you should go with her. And I thought, Chicago is so far away. I can't commit to something like that. How do I pay for something like that? There's so many reasons that I couldn't do it. But when there was someone I knew I could carpool with, there was just taking one class, and it was a class on the Pentateuch. the first 5 books of the Old Testament. That sounds interesting. That sounds like a Bible study. I like that. So I signed up like literally the week before, after registration had already closed. I went down there and said, okay, I guess I'll do this. And so then I started driving down there with Jamie. We were carpooling. And a month later, she dropped the class. And she didn't even continue in her seminary work. And by then, I was like, I love this. This is great. This is bringing me back to something that is so familiar but so new. But I, particular in my second career, was called to be a pastor, apparently. I figured that out after a few years. And the funny thing was that other people knew it before me. Tim, my husband, not surprised, completely supportive, model of faith for me, because he's been so faithful to me. He showed me grace. He's been supportive and not panicked, or doesn't show his panic. When I walked home and said, I'm quitting my job, burden's on you now. He was always there, and through seminary and internship. And even now, when I have doubts about myself, he's the one that believes in me. What is amazing to me about where God has placed me now is I was worried I was going to lose this identity that I had as a landscape architect, career woman, independent. And that was part of why I loved landscape architecture. But of course, what I really loved about landscape architecture is the environment, caring for the world and the creatures and anything that's alive. And God made me realize that, well, human beings are part of creation too. Human beings are part of the environment too. And that opened my eyes to, again, how faithful God is to me, how faithful God is to us and the world. What I really feel like is that I'm stepping out in the faith of God every day. God's faithfulness to me is what changed my life, realizing that none of that work I did or career I had, family I was raising, even in the hard times, none of that time was wasted because it brought me to where I am now. I learned and experienced, whether they were joyful or painful, they're all signs of God's faithfulness to me.